Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today here on Point of View. It is our weekend edition, and of course, we welcome your phone calls. We certainly are going to cover a lot of different topics. Yesterday, of course, the president was involved in Guns in America, and this was a very well done program, by the way. I will give high remarks and high praise to Anderson Cooper for asking a number of very good questions, and then, of course, an opportunity to address this issue of some of these gun control regulations. So we're going to be talking about that. I have a few clips from that just to give you a sense of what happened last night in case you didn't have a chance to watch it. Then we're going to be talking about Planned Parenthood. Another one of those Planned Parenthood videos is dropped. It's sort of more of a compilation, so we have given you an opportunity on our website, pointofview.net, to actually watch that if you would like to do so. And then, of course, in the second hour, we always like to bring in some other experts. Gary Bauer will be with us, and we have lots to talk about there as well. Sitting across from me, as always, Penna Dexter.
It's good to be here, Kerby. And I will say that Anderson Cooper did do a good job on that program. It was at George Mason University, and but Obama did, in true presidential style, refused to answer most of his questions. He just basically got his own message out. And so that's kind of where it was. I know that we have some audio from that. And so that's been one of the biggest stories in the news this week. But it's nice to be able to give a sort of a compliment to one of the mainstream media celebrities.
Yes, very well done. And earlier in the week, the president did also have kind of a press conference where he teared up. And I appreciate David French because he wrote this piece in which he said, why Obama's tears matter. And the point is that there are a lot of people saying, oh, he was just making that up. And I thought it was really interesting to come back and say, no, let's take this seriously, because he said, this is David French saying, one of the most difficult aspects of any presidency is meeting with families who suffered traumatic loss. Countless times presidents meet the families of those who died in combat, in natural disasters, and in mass shootings. And those meetings can be intensely emotional. If, in his heart of hearts, Obama blames guns for these horrific losses, it's easy to see why the announcement of new gun control measures would make him cry. And that's why his tears are significant. They convey a general depth of feeling on the left that has cultural impact far beyond the relatively insignificant executive orders. And so I think it's important to see that this issue is going to be around for a while. Some issues, Penna, we talk about, and we cover it one week, and we never even talk about it again the next week because they come and go. But I think this is going to be around for a while.
Well, it will, and it's certainly when there's a mass shooting, that's the reason then to step up the efforts for gun control, even though usually the provisions that are proposed wouldn't have done anything about that particular instance. But, you're so gracious to talk about his tears. My observation was that it's been played up so much in the media. Every news outlet had that picture of him with a tear. And Eric Erickson of he's not at Red State anymore. He's got his own Resurgence website. But he says the people who mocked Obama's thoughts and prayers, or mocked thoughts and prayers. Remember Obama and the left? They mocked the thoughts and prayers over San Bernardino when it was happening. They mocked that, but now they want everyone to know that Obama cried. So, in a sense, it's okay to cry in your press conference, but to pray,
Yeah. Well, and again, what David French was saying, he's laid down a marker because he said for the left, the war on guns really, truly matters. And this means turning the full resources of gun owners. And the point he was making, remember back, and we're old enough to remember a time when no one really had a report and interview a few people that smoke and ask if they were concerned about the first Surgeon General's report. But, eventually that war on smoking created such a thing that it was not cool, and it really pulled it together and prevented individuals who were smokers from being in various locations and on and on and on. And if indeed this becomes more than just a few executive orders, but just this full force of the pop culture, I'm talking Hollywood, I'm talking journalists, I'm talking television, talking movies against guns, you could see that this time next year we'd say, whoa, this was quite a movement against anybody that would want to own a gun.
You could see that. I tend to wonder how effective it would be. Guns have always been sort of a special subject.
Yes.
Because of the number of gun owners across the country and, really their sense that this is their right, their Second Amendment right, and sometimes even common sense legislation about guns or, executive orders in this case, tends to get the backs of gun owners up.
Yes.
I have to admit, sometimes perhaps unreasonably so, but I think there's so much sentiment right now against government overreach that I think that it would be almost like the comments and arguments against political correctness are beginning to take hold in this country.
Yeah.
I think it might be the same thing. I think going after guns might backfire on them.
Well, it certainly could possibly do so. Just before we take a first break, let me at least give you a little bit of what happened last. But one of the interesting questions, I don't think anybody's ever asked whether President Obama has ever owned a gun. And so Anderson Cooper asked, and this was his answer.
I have never owned a gun. Now, up at Camp David, we've got some skeet shooting. So on a fairly regular basis, we get a 12 gauge, and I'm not making any claims about my marksmanship, but...
Before you were president, did you ever feel a desire to get a gun, feel the need to get a gun?
I grew up mostly in Hawaii, and other than hunting for wild pig, which they do once in a while, there's not the popularity of hunting and sportsmanship with guns as much as there are in other parts of the country.
Right. I asked the question because there's a lot of people
farmhouse. The sheriff's office is really far away, so we'll get into some of that as well. But yeah. So
understanding.
Yes, but again, those were some of the comments by the president. We'll come back and hear a few more. But one of the other concerns that people are raising, and we'll get into this a little bit later, is that right now, when you do a background check, one of the ways in which they check is to see whether or not you have some kind of mental defect. Well, the president has said there's a problem with that because most of the people that are reported are those who are reported by the Veterans Administration. And now this new regulation, which would actually change HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, would allow various states to put maybe that's too much inside the weeds or too much inside baseball for people to understand. But there are some concerns even with these regulations, which, Penna, you said probably are not going to have much impact at all.
Yeah, and really, it kind of makes you question the confidentiality between physicians and patients.
That's
and
an issue.
I think that's the concern here on the mental health side of this.
And as a matter of fact, right now, in some places, if a health worker actually decides that you are mentally defective, that is pretty much rubber stamped. So all of a sudden now, a person that will determine whether or not you could have a firearm could be your local physician.
Yeah, amazing.
Who may or may not like you or may think that just because you want a gun, you're mentally defective. Anyway, we'll come back. We're going to have a chance to hear a little bit more from President Obama, and then, of course, we want to hear from you. All that coming up right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Much of the debate about the minimum wage is focused on providing a living especially to the level demanded by activists who want everyone to have a living wage. One of the prime targets has been Walmart. The company did raise its base wage last April and is scheduled to increase the base wage again next month. Last month, Walmart announced a 10% decrease in earnings per share for the third quarter. The CEO claimed it was due to the higher wages. Andy Putzer, who is the CEO of CKE Restaurants, recently explained in his op-ed that certain companies can weather an increase in the minimum wage better than others. He provides a comparison between Walmart and Apple to show the stark difference. Apple is the most profitable company on the Fortune 500. Its annual profit is $39 billion with 97,000 employees. That means Apple's annual profit per employee is $407,000. Remember that amount. Walmart has nearly the same profit, but has 5.8 million employees. That means their annual profit per employee is $6,000. As you can see, there's a stark difference between $407,000 and $6,000. Increasing the base wage just $1 an hour increases the annual wage cost by nearly $2,000. You can do the math. Subtracting $2,000 from $407,000 does not have much of an impact. Subtracting $2,000 from $6,000 has a greater impact. This is some of the harsh economic reality to attempts to raise wages to a level demanded by activists. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
On the go with the View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Yesterday, a town hall that actually was put together by CNN. Anderson Cooper asked some very good questions. President was there, had a chance to interact with a number of individuals. And I thought, even though it was just on one television network, it's something that a lot of people have been talking about. Of course, it all relates to these gun regulations. Penna Dexter with me, and we will certainly take your phone calls if you'd like to join us. Are you trying to take away guns, and do you even understand why people would want a gun?
Well, first of all, Anderson, I think it's useful to keep in mind I've been now president for over 7 years, and gun sales don't seem to have suffered during that time.
If anything, actually, you've helped.
They've gone up. I've been very good for gun manufacturers. More importantly, I'll tell you a story that I think indicates how I see the issue. Campaigning. I'd leave Chicago, a city which is wonderful. I couldn't be prouder of my city, but where every week there's a story about a young person getting shot. Some are gang members and it's turf battles. Sometimes it's innocent victims.
55 people have been shot in Chicago in the last 7 days.
Sometimes it's happened just a few blocks from my house, and I live in a reasonably good neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. So that's one image, right? Talking to families who've gone through the pain of losing somebody because of violence in Chicago, gun violence. Michelle and I are then campaigning out. If I was living in a farmhouse where the sheriff's department's pretty far away and somebody can just turn off the highway and come up to the farm, I'd want to have a shotgun or a rifle to make sure that I was protected, my family was protected. And she was absolutely right. And so part of the reason I think that this ends up being such a difficult issue is because have grown up hunting with their dad or going to the shooting range and are responsible gun owners. And then there's the reality that there are neighborhoods around the country where it is easier for a 12 or 13-year-old to purchase a gun and cheaper than it is for them to get a book.
Again, that's some of the comments by President Obama.
Wow, that statement. I mean, I've just got to question that. I'd like to see the research on that. Again, I just have to say thank you for understanding President Obama. One of the reasons why someone might want to have a gun. I mean, that's really good. I'm glad he did that. It just seems so interesting that every answer to mass shootings, police shootings, and some of these things is to take away guns, as if, especially he brought up the issue of Chicago, as if the guns go and shoot themselves. They don't. And so sometimes there's just not an answer. There are bad people in the world. But I think some of the things that he's done, vilifying police in various instances in recent months and years, make the problem of violence in the cities, which he mentioned, worse. Also, it's very interesting. There's a man who is actually heads up Heritage Action, part of the Heritage Foundation. His name is Michael Needham. And his quote on this was interesting about Obama. He said, Obama hasn't been able to tame ISIS, so he's changed the subject to guns. He's redefined the problem, which is a typical tactic of the left. And I feel like when you talk about a push, Kerby, that may be what this is.
Yes. Written about that. William McGurn a while back talked about the liberal theology of gun control, and I loved his example because he said that if you are pretty much of a progressive back when Ronald Reagan was there, they focused on the nuclear arms, not upon the evil empire. And as soon as he said that, a light went off, and all of a sudden I realized, yeah, here you focus on the weapon, the gun, not the person holding the gun. And I think there is a sense in which that is the case. There have been a lot that have been critical of what was or was not said. And so I thought for just a minute, I would play a piece by Hugh Hewitt and S.E. Cupp. Now, Hugh Hewitt has been on the program with us. S.E. Cupp has as well. And they were part of the panelists afterwards. And I think they sum up some of the concerns that people had with some of the answers the president gave.
No, I'm very disappointed. It was a terrific setting. Anderson Cooper opened with a very tough set of questions about why do you talk about confiscation? Why do you talk about Australia? What's your trust deficit? Anderson closed with tough questions. He got tough questions from Kea. He got tough questions from Kimberly, from Sheriff Paul. He answered none of them. It's not a conspiracy to worry about this president's abuse of power. He put out an unconstitutional executive order about immigration. He unconstitutionally limited Hobby Lobby's rights. It is not a conspiracy to be concerned about where he's going and to mock, minimize, and to denigrate the people whom you ought to be serving is deeply disappointing.
I thought it was deeply divisive to divide people into two groups, and I'll quote him, those who are concerned about violence and those who aren't. I don't think you could find a gun owner in this country that is not concerned about gun violence. And just because we don't want to support a slew of meaningless laws, his entire world philosophy, as we saw tonight, somehow going to submit to laws. And that requires a total suspension of disbelief. And a lot of the scenarios that he outlined tonight that he wants to prevent are scenarios that are already illegal, and he can't explain what new laws, what new legislation, new executive actions, expanded background checks are going to prevent any of these same crimes from being committed.
So again, just a couple of comments from the panelist afterwards. And he mentioned, Hugh Hewitt mentioned Taya Kyle. That is, again, the widow of Chris Kyle, who got to have asked the first question. And I thought it was a pretty well-articulated question and a fairly tough question, too.
In this round of executive action that he took this week, he's expanding the definition of a firearms dealer to require more people who sell guns pointed out this week that this reverses a gun control policy that was supposed to be for gun control that Clinton did. They wanted to stop. They wanted more licensed dealers. They wanted more licensing, or fewer licensed dealers. I'm sorry.
Right.
They wanted fewer licensed dealers because they thought they would sell fewer guns. So
Yes.
they have. They can't fix the problem of gun violence through making these policies.
Well, and again, as you pointed out, some of these decisions go back to a Clinton administration, and also just from a constitutional point of view. Forget the issue of guns for a moment. Just talk about procedure. If you have a law and you define who a gun seller is in the law, and then the president says, I have the right to change the definition. No, you don't. I mean, if indeed it is defined in the law, then only Congress can change that definition. True?
That's true.
Yeah.
So somebody just selling their gun to a friend or something, he's trying to expand it now to all these types of people. You have to get Congress to change the wording in a law, but he's just so frustrated with Congress not doing his will on this issue and many others that he'll just, issue these and see what happens.
We'll come back to this probably a little bit later, but I do maybe want to come back a little bit. He's reporting right now. If you do a background, that list are those who come from the Veterans Administration, usually PTSD and other kinds of things, because that is allowed. But because of the HIPAA requirements, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, there's a lot of privacy. And so in the past, states that had people that were mentally defective could not report those for the background checks. Well, now that's supposedly changing. And I only found this out yesterday. The Attorney General sent letters to all 50 governors permitting them to report the names and information of such individuals from their states to the federal government. So now it's pushing a lot of this responsibility now on background checks to the various states. As I pointed out, you can take New York, which right now has allowed doctors and even requires doctors to report to patients that are likely to engage in conduct that would result in serious harm to self or others. And if that is passed on to the state bureaucrat, they just, as they say, the New York Times just simply rubber stamp it. So if you had a bad relationship with your doctor, or if the doctor just has some questions about you, you'd end up on that list and you're not buying a gun. So that's an issue that nobody's talking about. But as always, we try to talk about some things on point of view that others are not. But let's come back, and we will get to some of your phone calls on firearms. But I did want to put another issue on the table, and that is we have another set, the latest, if you will, compilation of Planned Parenthood videos. And this new video is very significant. So we have Arina Grossu with us with
hard to come by, and there were very few sources. Now, the problem isn't so much locating information, it's all over the place. The problem is figuring out who you can trust to bring you truthful analysis and insights. Job loss in America. Is it China's fault? Is poverty around the world increasing or decreasing? Are the undercover Planned Parenthood videos really deceptive propaganda or a window into a world that many people don't want you to know about? What kind of experience does it take to be a good president? Is putting women in our special forces a great idea, or are there issues you may not be considering? Kerby Anderson has talked about all of these and much more on his regular Viewpoints commentaries. Sign up to get them in your inbox each weekday. Go to pointofview.net. Click on the link at the very top left of the page that says Connect with Point of View. That's pointofview.net and connect with Point of View. Let Kerby help you sort through information overload and find the truth with Viewpoints. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station.
Talk about Planned Parenthood in just a minute, but let me take a phone call from this last segment here in Georgia. WGPH. Ken, thank you for calling today.
Good afternoon, Kerby. Thanks for covering this joke of a hearing by Mr. Obama. I hear you, but I really don't hear you. And as you aptly, you and Penna have described, and it was a good point she made. This is a deflection of the real problem, and being a strong Second Amendment person, I fought against gun control here in Georgia for years, and it is people who want to deflect, and they use the word gun violence. It's humans committing violence. It could be a hammer, it could be a knife, et cetera, et cetera. But isn't it amazing of all of our amendments, the second jump on that First Amendment freedoms, but then when it comes to the Second Amendment, no. And I remember the other night, Chris, I got a tingle up my leg. Matthews asked Hillary, are you a socialist? Are you a I'm a proud progressive Democrat. Everybody needs to take notice of what a progressive is. A progressive is somebody who knows better for you than you know for yourself, and we're going to cram it down your throat whether you like it or not. So I'll get to my ultimate point here. This as the president, he stood up somewhere, his first press conference or when he left for Hawaii, and said, I'm back, and I'm going to leave it all out on the field.
Yes, he did say that.
2008, he said, I'm going to fundamentally transform America. Boy, has he done a terrible job of transforming America. It's gone downhill greatly. And the ultimate goal in working with people like Bloomberg, Michael Bloomberg, former mayor of New York, who's got his own agenda, along with possibly monies from George Soros, is they want ultimately gun registration, gun confiscation, and they want some type of laws implemented similar to what we have in Australia, in Canada, other so-called modern societies, countries who have succumbed to this. And if you talk to the citizenry there, you will realize the disastrous consequences of allowing big brother government to take away a fundamental right of being able to defend your life, liberty, your home, your property. And that's what liberals and progressives are seeking, ultimately seeking to control in the majority of Americans' lives.
Ken, appreciate your calls. Penna?
Well, I mean, that was good on a number of fronts, but going back to the very first issue having to do with sort of changing the subject, this order is supposed to bring us 230 new FBI personnel to process these background checks.
Yes.
But the other area where we're supposed to be checking background is the refugee program. Mm-hmm. And we're doing a terrible job of doing it, as they've been looking at bringing in Syrian refugees. People that know, even the FBI head, James Comey, have said that we really aren't able to delve that deeply and find these people. And then, of course, there was somebody that came into California and Texas just, I don't know, was it yesterday? And was making bombs and has been caught. Mm-hmm. So those are the ones that were caught. So we're not doing a good job on the front of bringing people in from, terrorist countries or refugees on screening their backgrounds. And yet he wants to screen the backgrounds of U.S. citizens who, might own a gun.
Well, we will certainly take some more phone calls on that. But as you mentioned, deflecting from some issues, and even though the president wants to talk a lot about the Second Amendment, he doesn't really want to talk too much about Planned Parenthood. And so with this new Planned Parenthood video that is out, we have a link to it so that you can watch it, and I would encourage you to do so. We bring on Arina Grossu, who is the director of the Center for Human Dignity at the Family Research Council, has her BA in philosophy and MA in theology, and has really been articulating a biblical point of view on so many different issues, as well holds a certification in healthcare ethics from the National Catholic Bioethics Center. And Arina, thank you so very much for joining us today here on Point of View.
Kerby, thanks for having me on.
We've enjoyed having you on in the past, and this latest video, can you give us some commentary on that? We've just posted it on the website. I encourage people to watch it, but what will they see when they watch this latest video that's dropped?
The latest video shows a number of different Planned Parenthood top doctors talking about the financial profits. And this is in the background of Cecile Richards talking about how they are not making profits. So it's juxtaposed to what the top doctors are actually saying. A lot of these videos had been shown before, and there are some new footage. But it just shows that Cecile Richards is really not saying what the rest of her top doctors are saying. And this is comes at a time right now where today, just a couple hours ago, Obama vetoed a bill to defund Planned Parenthood. And so we're seeing that he has no interest whatsoever in tackling Planned Parenthood. This is his chance. This is the first time in his presidency that a pro-life bill has ended up on his desk, and he has, of course, vetoed it.
Well, Arina, this is Penna Dexter. We did, of course, expect it, but just talk a little bit, since you're there at FRC watching these things. I mean, there have been 60 tries for part of that bill. And so what does this say, I guess, number one, for new Speaker Paul Ryan, number two, for the Senate, that this bill could actually reach the president's desk?
Well, I think it sets a really good precedent for Republicans that we can do this again, and that we just need a pro-life president. And so I hope that this encourages the troops to rally around the Republican candidates, and once we have our candidate, we all have to really just go forth with that, because not only will this president be able to sign bills like this, but also pick the next Supreme Court justices. And it's really, really important that we have a pro-life president in office.
So the bill defunded Planned Parenthood, but it also repealed portions of Obamacare, some of them having to do with abortion, correct?
That's right. And so it was going to defund about $450 million that goes to Planned Parenthood and the parts of Obamacare where money does go to for abortion.
You know, one of the things we talked about just the other day had to do with this annual report from Planned Parenthood, and we had Marjorie Dannenfelser on, and she was saying, well, you can, if you look at the report, we are spending a lot of bucks for very little bang, because you aren't getting mammograms. There's a decrease in almost all the services except abortion. And if we're going to spend, $535 million, $500 million on a company that actually is making a lot of money by killing babies, I think you could make that case just from an economic point of view, much less a moral point of view, couldn't you?
It's incredible that we are giving Planned Parenthood so much money. In fact, I've taken a look at the annual report, and their combined federal and state grants and contracts has gone up by $25 million in this past fiscal year. And so they're getting $25 million more, yet, as you've said, they've dropped their cancer screening and prevention programs down by 63% since 2009. Their breast exams have gone down by 56%, and this is not mammograms, because obviously they don't do mammograms. And a woman who walks into a Planned Parenthood who's pregnant, there is 160 times likelier to get an abortion than an adoption referral.
Wow.
So here they're getting more money, they're providing less services. So where is this money going? And we need to know what is happening with this money. How are they spending this money if they're providing less services and you know, I mean, I think from the salaries, Cecile's salary went up to close to $600,000, and her top doctors get between $250,000 and $500,000.
Well, in FRC's update, one statement just jumped out at me, Arina, and that is the bottom line is the bottom line. Planned Parenthood doesn't need taxpayer dollars. All the government's contributions do is enable Richards to spend more money on politics, and they certainly do that.
Yes, they have.
Let's
And
take
they
a
have just-
yeah. Let me take a break real quickly because I want to give you a chance to answer that. But we have one of those mandatory breaks, Arina. You know that, and the breaks wait for no one. So let's take a break. We'll come back and continue our conversation with her. But as we're doing that, let me give you an action item. There'll be a couple, but the first one is to watch the video. It's only about 2 minutes long, a little over 2 minutes long, and then click that share button and put it on your Facebook page. Put it on maybe a Twitter feed that you have. Maybe you have a blog. Send it to somebody. This is a very nice summary in a compilation of some of the videos, and I think it really blows Planned Parenthood out of the water. We'll be right back.
In less than a month, the country will begin the formal process of picking a president. The nation's first state contest, the Iowa caucuses, begin February 1st. On the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton holds a substantial lead in the polls there. But opponent Bernie Sanders continues to draw large crowds and raise lots of money. There's much excitement on the Republican side. Who will drop out? Who will remain? Who will get their vote out? Who will emerge, perhaps not winning, but with lots of votes making a strong showing in states that are not winner-take-all? Who has staying power? Developments in the presidential contests made 2015 a crazy year. But some things in politics don't change. Morton Blackwell has taught the principles of political campaigns to thousands of conservatives, spanning a couple of generations through his Leadership Institute. He articulates some rules that stand the test of time. Here are the questions this wise teacher of the laws of the public policy process says we should ask about candidates when choosing one to get behind. First, does the candidate have a record of personal activism and leadership for conservative principles? If you're not looking to support a conservative, you could apply this question to whatever principles the candidate espouses. Morton Blackwell says, talk is cheap. Actions have consequences. Past performance does not necessarily predict future results, but it usually is the best indicator. Second question, does the candidate surround himself or herself with people notably committed to the candidate's principles? The famous adage, personnel is policy, applies here. As Morton Blackwell points out, if elected, a candidate without an inner circle of reliable conservatives to help him or her staff and administration has no chance of winning victories in tough battles against liberals. And think about the enduring impact of a president's Supreme Court appointments. Here's another good question. Has the candidate ever continued to fight hard for his or her principles when it appeared to be a losing battle? Morton Blackwell says, never fully trust anyone who has not knowingly gone down fighting for an important good cause that he or she believed was losing. And a related question, does the candidate frequently reverse his or her positions on important issues? This candidate can't be trusted to keep promises. To test a candidate's commitment to causes he or she campaigns on, Morton Blackwell says to go back and see how much support that candidate has given over the years to organizations and other candidates working to advance those causes. Every elected official needs lots of support in and out of politics to get things done. And here's a key question to ask. If elected, would the candidate melt when the heat is on? The left government. It's going to take a president with great strength of character to loosen that grip. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, weekend edition, Penna Dexter. I'm Kerby Anderson. Of course, we have Arina Grossu with us for a few more minutes. And Arina, talk about that, because Penna asked that question about, does some of that $535 million go to just help politically Planned Parenthood continue to get more money?
You know, we are trying to figure out what are they doing with that money? We know that Planned Parenthood just announced endorsement of Hillary Clinton, $20 million at least. And we want to know, where is this money going? They've had a 70% drop in patients and a huge drop in their services. So all this money that's heading to Planned Parenthood, and the fact that Obama just decided that it's okay to continue funding them with almost $500 million is really unconscionable.
Well, I remember when Obamacare was being rolled out, you had a lot of these so-called navigators, people that were supposed to be signing people up, were from Planned Parenthood. Now, I don't know if they were getting paid by the federal government or if this was out of the goodness of Planned Parenthood's heart providing these people, but they formed a big block of that group of people that was out there trying to sell young people on Obamacare.
That's right, and they are continuing to push. I mean, one of the comments that President Obama made as he vetoed this bill was that this would somehow thwart health care, but it's really his vision of what health care is, which is abortion on demand and abortion-inducing drugs and devices on demand, whether it's through Obamacare or whether it's through funding Planned Parenthood, and this must stop. I mean, he is the most pro-abortion president we've ever had, and this is why it's so important to have a pro-life president.
Let me talk about some of the action items. One that you heard me mention just a minute ago, Arina, and that is to watch the video and then to put it on your Facebook page or Twitter feed or something like that. Another is we have a link to Family Research Council, and you have the information about the Restoring Americans Health Care Freedom Act, which, of course, the president vetoed. But it seems to me that, first of all, by going to FRC, they can sign up for the Washington Update if they don't get that. And number two, they could also find out how their member of Congress voted. And if they voted for it, say, thank you for doing it, let's do it again. Because sometimes after a series of times presidents change, I can remember 3 separate attempts, Congress trying to get welfare reform. Bill Clinton vetoed it and eventually signed it. I don't have any hope that this president's going to change his mind, but still it's valuable in doing that. And so certainly let's reward those members of Congress that voted for this, or let's express our disdain or disagreement with those who voted against it. Is that a good action item?
Excellent action items. They should also check out the Planned Parenthood facts so that they know when they're talking to their friends what Planned Parenthood is doing and how they're spending their money, and really to be very active in this next election cycle because it's super important.
Amen to that. So can we get the Planned Parenthood facts at frc.org?
Yes. So frc.org/Planned Parenthood facts, or just go to frc.org and you'll find it.
Yes, we have the link there, and I would encourage people to get it. So, Arina, I appreciate you joining us today, and keep up the good work. And we knew the president was going to veto it, but nevertheless, it's still worth getting that record vote. And when we have an election coming up, it's important to keep that in mind when you decide who you will or will not vote for in this next election. So thank you so very much for joining us today here on Point of View.
Thanks for having me.
Just before we take a break, Penna, I might mention that people that listen to our program online hear your commentary. We always play it at about this time, Candidate Qualities. Yesterday, we spent a fair amount of time kind of working our way through it because some people had questions about Donald Trump or Ben Carson. We had those questions. We had some about Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio and the others. And when you're looking at a presidential candidate, you have some good questions. You know, what kind of record do they have of activism? Who do they surround themselves with? And that came up yesterday when we talked about Ben Carson, interestingly enough. And also, has the candidate ever continued to fight hard when it appeared to be a losing battle? The conversation we just had a minute ago on Planned Parenthood. And it seems to me that those questions, if people would ask them of their president, of their senators, or members of Congress, even people running for the state legislature, you would have better people in office, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you would. You know, first of all, the pro-life component. I mean, for many, many election cycles, we've had a pro-life candidate on the Republican side that you pretty much, it's a requirement to be a Republican nominee to be pro-life. And all of a sudden, here we are in this time where we're actually making so many gains in the legislatures about the issue of life, protecting the sanctity of life. We've got the head of somebody who's leading the national polls. Now he's not leading so much in Iowa. He's not really anymore. But Donald Trump, he says he's pro-life, yes, but his whole basically adult life, he's been pro-choice until recently. And so somebody that isn't demonstrating pro-life sensibilities is actually could be the nominee. It's just amazing. But yes, Morton Blackwell, he's got these rules. And even though all the rules are being broken right now in this GOP nomination battle, there are still some rules of politics. There are. And there, especially in conservative politics, these questions that Morton Blackwell poses and says we should pose, They make sense. And, he's always said personnel is policy. And
Yes.
it's become a mantra now, a political mantra that personnel is policy. So we do need to see who people are surrounding themselves with in their campaigns. Some of those top people will actually be in their administration. So that's one. And also, how much do they stand? How much heat can they take? Do they melt? Do they change? Do they bow to leadership when they've promised their constituents that they're going to fight for a certain issue? These are things to look at, and we've got some real differences when we look at the various candidates on those issues. That's why I wrote it. I wanted people to start to get serious because, we've had a lot of fun, and we've really been proud of the array of great talent on the Republican side. So you see the conservative values there. But now it's going to be very dangerous if Republicans don't land, and if conservatives don't land on someone. It's going to be dangerous.
Well, we talked about a lot of that yesterday. Of course, I read a couple of quotes from Donald Trump where he said, "I'm pro-choice. I hate the concept of abortion. Associated Press, I believe that it is a personal decision, should be left to the woman and their 2016. A little different, but nevertheless, that's a question. We read a little bit about his stand on don't ask, don't tell and homosexuality. And then when you had one question about a candidate reverses his or her positions, okay, Donald Trump has changed.
It's just about every position.
Yeah, Marco Rubio has changed. He's become much stronger on immigration, but it leaves a question mark, and so that's important. And then I mentioned just in passing, let me clarify that in case you didn't hear the program yesterday. Somebody asked, why is Ben Carson not doing so well? And I said, well, first of all, he's lost a number of staff. And part of that is Armstrong Williams. And I don't want to be real heavy on Armstrong Williams, but he is somewhat controversial, to put it mildly. And when you can't keep your staff together and when your staff leave, that says, well, what kind of staff are you picking? Who are the kind of people that might be in your administration? And I think a big question that you have to ask of people that have never been in office, Donald Trump, Carly Fiorina, Ben Carson, is, okay, what kind of people would they put in position? Because they obviously don't have as much political expertise. They're going to bring in people, and where are they going to come from? And so these are questions that are very relevant questions that I think you should ask. And so let me encourage you, as you go to our website right now, you will see that we have Penna Dexter's commentary. We always put it up just as soon as it airs, and it's called Candidate Qualities. Very well written, very good piece. We'll come back and talk more about that in just a few minutes as well. But you can also listen to it, as we've mentioned, on air. And then I think we will come back and spend a little bit of time with our good friend Gary Bauer. We thought maybe he would also give us some perspective. We'll also talk about everything from Planned Parenthood. What about this North Korean so-called hydrogen bomb? Now people are not so convinced that it is. The recruiting of jihadists. About those 1,000 different thugs all through Germany on New Year's Eve that were raping women. What about some of that? So we got lots to cover. And again, you can find out more about all of this by visiting our website, pointofview.net. As you go there, also click on that button, 15 Days in Israel and Greece. We'd love to have you join us when we travel there in May. Let's take a break, and we'll also take some more phone calls, 1-800-351-1212. All that coming up right after this.
Have you ever thought about taking a trip to the Holy Land? I know I have, but perhaps like me, you've always thought, there's no way I could ever afford it. And how would I get around, make sure I see everything? Well, maybe, just maybe, it's time to realize you can do it. Point of View has made the plans. 15 days, 10 in Israel, the possibility of 5 more on the journeys of Paul in Greece. And the cost? Well, it's pretty surprising. You can check it out at pointofview.net. Click on the Journey to Jerusalem banner. Imagine yourself in Caesarea and Nazareth, where Jesus grew up, in Capernaum, on the Sea of Galilee. We don't suggest you get out and try walking, but, well, you could. The Dead Sea, Masada, the Temple Mount, the Garden Tomb, it's all included, and you'll be accompanied by Kerby Anderson. And I don't even have time to talk about Greece. Athens, Corinth, Berea, Thessalonica, Philippi. See the full schedule at pointofview.net. Come on, take that next step. Pointofview.net. Journey to Jerusalem. Pointofview.net.
Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour, it is our weekend edition. Penna Dexter with me as well, and we, as we have been advertising, now are joined by Gary Bauer, President of American Values, an individual who served under the Reagan administration as the Chief Domestic Policy Advisor. And one of the things that we wanted to do, or talk about a few of the issues he's been addressing in his end-of-day report. We always encourage you to find out more. If you click on that button there, it will take you to ouramericanvalues.org, and you can sign up and find out what we read every single day to prepare for this program. So, Gary Bauer, always great to have you on the program.
Thank you, Kerby. Always great to be with you.
Well, we always talk about tough things when we talk with you. North Korea is front and center. At first, we thought it was a hydrogen bomb. Now we're not so sure. But does the explosion of another bomb in North Korea illustrate maybe some kind of game-changing event?
Well, we're not completely sure, as you just hinted at, whether this was a technological breakthrough or not. But what we do know is that year after year, North Korea has been moving forward as one of the worst regimes in the world to get a hold of some of the worst weapons in the world. And unfortunately, in the case of North Korea, a number of U.S. presidents of both parties have really followed policies that were ineffective in preventing North Korea from continuing on the road that it's on right now. So when I heard the news, of course, my first assumption is that ultimately here they will develop what they need to develop, and that's bad news for the Pacific and for the odds of maintaining the peace in that area. We have a number of allies, South Korea, Japan, and others that we're worried about. But I also thought immediately about Iran, because the current president, the current administration, is following even weaker policies with Iran than we followed previously with North Korea. Iran and North Korea have been known to work together on nuclear technology. And Kerby, I'm just afraid we're on the road here that, it may not be tomorrow, but it's certainly going to be in the next decade, where one of these rogue nations is going to use a nuclear weapon, and it may be on a U.S. city. And, of course, that will be an unprecedented disaster.
Hi, Gary. This is Penna Dexter.
Hi, Penna.
And, we've had the Iran deal, and then after the signing of it, you had Iran test firing nuclear missiles and us not doing anything about it. No additional sanctions, or we're still going to lift the sanctions. So, in a sense, I mean, you mentioned the weakness of Obama in, I think, foreign policy in general. This is just another one of the results of that, isn't it?
It really is. I think the next 12 months until a new president takes office is probably going to be the most dangerous 12 months this country has gone through since the end of World War II. Every thug in the world, after 7 years, has taken the measurement of the president. They realize that he's not strong. He's not a strong leader. He has an incredible reluctance to exert American power. He thinks that by the sheer power of his voice, he can change what foreign governments, including those of our enemies, intend to do. It's been a failure every place he's tried it. And now with 1 year left to go, I think some of these countries are going to try to get under the wire. I mean, who knows? The next president may actually be serious about using American power. So if you're a dictator, an authoritarian leader, or an aggressive country trying to gain power for yourself and your people, this next 12 months is a real window of opportunity for you.
Gary, something else we've been talking about is the fact that now there's actually going to be voting going on in the presidential race on the GOP side, well, both sides. And so, there's a seriousness that comes. I mean, not that it hasn't been serious with the debates with the 17 that's honed down to, 14 or whatever. But now people are really going to have to go in and vote or caucus. Do you think that all these foreign policy debacles, certainly they've taken the attention of the debate to foreign policy, do you think this affects this Trump phenomenon that is out there?
Penna, I think I know the answer a lot of people hope I'm going to make, but I have to say that I believe the events that we've seen in recent months, the disaster, the terrorist attack in Paris, San Bernardino, some of the events around the world, I think it has had an impact on, let's say, Dr. Carson's campaign, because he was seen as somebody that, and I'm not agreeing with this at all, but as somebody that may not be a strong enough leader, just his demeanor doesn't seem strong enough. I think they probably have heard Hillary Clinton, even though she's got a lot of experience. I think it will not be that hard to tie her in the campaign to some of these events. She was, after all, Secretary of State all those years. But there's some evidence that these events have actually moved people toward Donald Trump, because he seems like a confident, assertive leader that is intent on, as he puts it, making America great again. Thinks that the country's been cheated, that the American people are being cheated in a number of ways. So I think he's a formidable candidate, maybe even more formidable now than he was before. So it's going to be interesting. My personal view is that Senator Cruz from Texas is the one candidate with the biggest chance to derail Donald Trump. But interestingly, the establishment here in Washington despises Cruz as much as, or maybe even more than they despise Trump.
So you don't think they'd take a Cruz over a Trump?
I think the establishment sees both of them with horror. I mean,
wow.
With Trump, of course, the reasons is obvious. He's got enough resources. He does what he wants to do, and he's violated all the rules of political correctness. But in the case of Senator Cruz, to some of the establishment, he's committed an even greater sin. He defied them. He fought on things that they were signaling shouldn't be fought on. He was willing to even shut the government down, if that's what Obama ended up doing, in order to try to get some progress on some of these issues. So a lot of the establishment knows they're not going to be hired to be part of his administration if he wins.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll continue with Gary Bauer for a few more minutes. And if you'd like to join our conversation, those on the line, hold on. We'll get to you. 1-800-351-1212. When we're talking about some of the incidents around the world, certainly one that we'll talk about, what happened in Cologne, Germany. Just 1,000 different men attacking women there. And I've been reading the reports here, and I can't still find out what their religious background is or the ethnic background. It isn't really being covered here by the mainstream media. Maybe Gary can fill us in on that. His piece recently on recruiting jihadists. And of course, in the first hour, we spent some time talking about guns in America. The piece last night where Anderson Cooper asked pretty good, tough questions of the president. We might have a chance to hear one more of the comments from the president. So a lot more to cover here. 1-800-351-1212. Privileged to have with us Gary Bauer, and we'll talk about that with him and also with you if you'd like to join the conversation, as we have covered lots of topics. It is never a quiet January, but this one has been busier than most. We'll be back with more right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Much of the debate about the minimum wage is focused on providing a living wage for hardworking people. As admirable as that might have seemed, there are consequences to raising the minimum wage, especially to the level demanded by activists who want everyone to have a living wage. One of the prime targets has been Walmart. The company did raise its base wage last April and is scheduled to increase the base wage again next month. Last month, Walmart announced a 10% decrease in earnings per share for the third quarter. The CEO claimed it was due to the higher wages. Andy Putzer, who is the CEO of CKE Restaurants, recently explained in his op-ed that certain companies can weather an increase in the minimum wage better than others. He provides a comparison between Walmart and Apple to show the stark difference. Apple is the most profitable company on the Fortune 500. Its annual profit is $39 billion with 97,000 employees. That means Apple's annual profit per employee is $407,000. Remember that amount. Walmart has nearly the same profit, but has 5.8 million employees. That means their annual profit per employee is $6,000. As you can see, there's a stark difference between $407,000 and $6,000. Increasing the base wage just $1 an hour increases the annual wage cost by nearly $2,000. You can do the math. Subtracting $2,000 from $407,000 does not have much of an impact. Subtracting $2,000 from $6,000 has a greater impact. This is some of the harsh economic reality to attempts to raise wages to a level demanded by activists. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Weekend edition, Penna Dexter with me, and by phone, Gary Bauer. Thought we'd go back to Guns in America last night. We've had a chance to hear from a few of the comments by the president, but this was one more where he made the case that guns should be safer.
There's nothing else in our lives that we purchase where we don't try to make it a little safer if we can. Traffic fatalities have gone down drastically during my lifetime. And part of it is technology, and part of it is that the National Highway Safety Administration does research and they figure out, you know what, seatbelts really work. And then we pass some laws to make sure seatbelts are fastened. Airbags make a lot of sense. Let's try those out. Toys. We say, you know what, we find out that kids are swallowing toys all the time. Let's make sure that the toys aren't so small that they swallow them if they're for toddlers or infants. Medicine. Kids can't open aspirin caps. Now, the notion that we would not apply the same basic principles to gun ownership as we do to everything else that we own, but just to try to make them safer, or the notion that anything we do to try to make them safer is somehow a plot to take away guns, that contradicts what we do to try to create a better life for Americans in every other area of our lives.
It kind of reminds me of the comment we heard earlier from S.C. Culp, and that is there are people that are concerned about gun violence and then people that are not concerned about gun violence. And Gary Bauer, who is a gun owner, who isn't concerned about gun violence. Some of these straw mans are a little bit difficult, and maybe you didn't actually watch that because I know that's bad for your blood pressure. But nevertheless, we had a chance in the first hour to play some of the clips and talk about them. Your thoughts?
Oh, my goodness. Look, there's not a big debate in America on the issue of gun safety, and the only reason the president is talking about that is you'll notice, your listeners will notice that in the last couple of years, the rhetoric that all the liberal politicians are using is about gun safety. We need more gun safety rules. And what they mean are the proposals they're pushing to make it harder for law-abiding people to purchase a firearm. But suddenly we're having a conversation about how difficult the caps are on aspirins, and we need to do things.
Let's make
like
it harder for
guns.
kids to buy toys.
I know. I mean, it's such a bait and switch, and the president, as well as a lot of these other guys, must think we're all idiots. I think it used to work, but I doubt if it works now. And by the way, I think this is one of the most dramatic developments that's happened in recent political history. The public, just a few years ago, appeared by 2-to-1 to want more restrictions on purchasing firearms. And now the recent polls are showing the country narrowly favors no new restrictions. And I think that's the public's reaction to the increasing crime that we're seeing, the dangers from radical Islam, shootings, the fear that their family or they may be caught in a situation where they don't have any way to protect themselves.
Wow. Let's take a phone call along the way. We'll certainly get more after Gary Bauer leaves. But Phil in Georgia, I think you wanted to kind of raise that issue about gun shootings and accidents. Go for it. Well, I guess we lost that. Ooh. I guess it was a bad phone line. But the question he was asking was about how many people die in gun-related shootings and all accidents. And the reason I set up that piece by Barack Obama was that he was talking about that traffic accidents are going down, Gary, and it's gone from about 45,000 down to about 35,000. And, of course, you've had about 30,000 people killed in gun violence every year. But I thought this was interesting, Penna. Last night's the first time I've ever heard the president say what we've been saying for some time, and that is 20,000 of those 30,000 are suicides. So if you really want to do an apples-to-apples comparison, the shootings are very small compared to the number of accidents. And I'm just, for a moment, comparing car accidents to shootings. And so, Gary, if you even look at the latest Gallup poll, they had 23 different issues that people in America could say were important, and gun control was like 19th. There's not just a real groundswell right now for us to have new gun laws.
No, there really isn't. And, I did watch a few minutes of the show last night before my blood pressure did go up, and I turned the station. But one of the things that was so interesting was CNN explaining why they were doing the town hall. And they said, look, this was not the White House's idea. This was our idea. It was CNN's idea. We saw the shootings in San Bernardino, Anderson Cooper said, and we thought, you know what? We need to have a town hall on gun violence. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I watched the events unfold in San Bernardino, I was not thinking about we need to do something on gun violence. I was thinking about how are we going to get under control this growing problem of radical Islamists in the United States who are ready and willing to commit jihad against their fellow Americans. And it's so interesting to me that the liberal establishment's reaction when jihadists yell Allah Akbar and kill Americans is we better do something about guns, something that the American people have a right to, instead of saying to themselves, we need to get more serious about getting radical Islam under control.
Yeah, and the other reaction has been among a lot of thinking Americans that we ought to be careful about who we allow into this nation, whether it be through refugees coming from countries where, there's a lot of refugees from those governments that are oppressive, and many are Islamic, or other reasons, visa overstays and things like that. And so, but that issue to the administration is no, our vetting is fine. We're doing a great job. And so it's just, it is amazing how divided the country is. And I think Obama does everything to exacerbate that.
No question about it. And by the way, just today, arrests were made, one in Texas, one in California, of people from, I believe, Iraq, but they were Palestinian in ethnic origins. And they had come to the United States in previous groups of migrants or refugees, and they were both arrested as working with ISIS to pull off attacks on the United States. Before the break, you mentioned that this incident in Cologne, Germany, Kerby, it got almost no attention initially, but on New Year's Eve, there was this incident in near the train station there. Over 1,000 men, described as being of foreign origin, Middle Eastern and African men, sexually assaulted, in some case raped, women who arrived at the train station with their boyfriends or their husbands, coming to Cologne to be part of New Year's Eve celebrations. The police were totally unprepared to deal with this. The media put a lid on the story because they didn't want the public to hear about it. But over the last 4 or 5 days, the story has broken wide open in Europe and now in the United States. And we're now finding out these kinds of attacks took place all over Germany, all over Europe, by men that had come into Europe in this latest wave of migrants. And once again, we're seeing that multiculturalism isn't all that much to be happy about when the culture you're dealing with can easily justify violence against women, particularly if the women are German infidels and not fellow Muslims.
When you think of who was on the front page of the Person of the Year for Time magazine, Angela Merkel, I'm hoping that maybe this alone was a wake-up call. I have my doubts, but to recognize that this is just not working. And, of course, we have to learn a lesson from what's happening in Europe to apply it here, don't we, Gary?
We sure do. And by the way, can you think of any comparable situation where people that supposedly were trying to escape violence, that were fearful of their lives, entered another country begging for compassion and for help and so forth, and within weeks of doing that, on a widespread basis, engaged in violence against the citizens of the country they were asking to welcome them? I don't think there's another analogy to this, but what I can think of, Penna and Kerby, are conquering armies that come into a country, and unfortunately, all too often, will show that they're in charge by molesting and raping. Variation of that right now across Europe.
A lot of wisdom from Gary Bauer, and that's why we always like to have him on the program. And again, we have a link to ouramericanvalues.org. A lot of what we've talked about will be, or already has been, in his end of the day report. Please sign up. We read it every single day. And Gary, thank you for joining us again here on Point of View.
Great to be with both of you. Have a fantastic weekend.
We're going to take a break, and then we'll take some of those phone calls. 1-800-351-1212. If you've been waiting, you'll be first up, and we'll be right back.
They call this the information age. It used to be news was hard to come by and there were very few sources. Now, the problem isn't so much locating information, it's all over the place. The problem is figuring out who you can trust to bring you truthful analysis and insights. Job loss in America, is it China's fault? Is poverty around the world increasing or decreasing? Are the undercover Planned Parenthood videos really deceptive propaganda or a window into a world that many people don't want you to know about? What kind of experience does it take to be a good president? Is putting women in our special forces a great idea, or are there issues you may not be considering? Kerby Anderson has talked about all of these and much more on his regular Viewpoints commentaries. Sign up to get them in your inbox each weekday. Go to pointofview.net. Click on the link at the very top left of the page that says Connect with Point of View. That's pointofview.net and connect with Point of View. Let Kerby help you sort through information overload and find the truth with viewpoints. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Weekend edition, we have covered quite a bit, and if you would like to join the conversation on any of the topics, we've talked about guns in America and the town hall that was last night. We have certainly talked about Planned Parenthood. We've talked a little bit with Gary Bauer about everything from North Korea to Iran to this attack in Cologne, Germany, and we'll get into some other issues. But let's go back and circle back to some of the conversation about that Guns in America town hall last night. Joan in Texas, I think you want to talk about Taya Kyle, so go for it.
Yes, it's just that I want everybody to read what she wrote. She spoke from the heart. I'm not going to give up my guns, as simple as that. I love this country, but that's my right to have, to bear arms. And she just spoke from her heart, and I feel sorry for all people who have lost their children, but I think that the President of the United States, to me, he wants to take away that Second Amendment from us. And for myself, I'm not comfortable with that. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Well,
thank you, Joan.
Thank you, Joan.
We don't have the actual audio, but she's the wife, Taya Kyle, the wife of Chris Kyle. She was the first question in this town hall, and she point blank told Obama that laws don't keep things from happening. And she should know, of course, because her husband, Chris, was murdered with a gun. And then a rape victim came and asked, she was assaulted for 3 hours, and she would like to be armed to protect herself. I mean, so those put Obama, I think those were good to put him in a position where he didn't own the microphone, and he actually had to kind of be pulled back on his heels a little bit with those. So I was proud of Taya. That was good. I wish I had the audio or the quote, but I don't have it in front of me.
Well, and again, we'll just see if we can post some of that. I'm sure they have a script that is available, and we certainly have given you a chance to hear a few of those comments. But again, there were, what I thought was so striking, Penna, was just the number of people that were allowed to speak. Because at one point, the president made a big deal about, well, the National Rifle Association isn't here. And so I later saw an interview that was done with Chris Cox, who actually addresses some of the legislative issues. And he said, why would we come? They said that we would only be able to ask one question that would be pre-screened. He said, kind of like, I've got better things to do with my life than go and only ask one pre-screened question. Why would I want to be there? So then the question was, well, do you want to meet with him? And he said, well, what are we going to talk about? Basketball? I mean, this is a president who's disagreed with us on all those issues. And
blames them for all the mass shootings and things like that.
So, I mean, after a while, you just go, well, okay. So, but nevertheless, there were a number of other people that I thought brought a sense of reality. And Taya Kyle certainly would understand what it's like to have a husband shot here in America after he was able to avoid being shot in these various theaters of conflict, both in Iraq and Afghanistan. And, of course, a woman that was raped could understand that as well. So those are some issues that I certainly think deserve to be on the table. And if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. And I thought I'd come back for just a minute before we get into some other issues to this idea that the background check that the president talked about was something that the National Rifle Association agreed with, true. But one of the problems is that oftentimes people that are actually flagged are flagged erroneously. The other day in the debate, and I do watch these debates, in the Democratic debate, Hillary Clinton said, we prevented 2 million people from getting guns. No, we didn't. Those were 2 million false, in almost every case, flags. But now the problem with the instant criminal background check is that any category for mentally defective, most of those right now come from the Department of Veterans Affairs. So these new regulations now say that for the first time, states can actually submit individuals that they believe are mentally defective to this list, so that would prevent people from getting a gun. Now, the benefit of that is that you might catch, it's possible, you might have caught the shooter in Chattanooga. You might have caught the shooter perhaps in a couple of the other venues, but maybe even in Denver. But still, you have to be concerned, as some people have pointed out, that right now you do have in New York a law that requires doctors to report to authorities any patient who is likely to engage in conduct that would result in serious harm to self or others. And then a state bureaucrat just merely rubber stamps that. Well, then that would just be sent on to the federal government without anybody actually looking and saying, okay, was that a good, accurate diagnosis from the doctor? So all of a sudden you've got that. And of course, you've got the whole issue of patient confidentiality, which goes right out the window now. And my concern is, because I see our next one here is an individual that actually has served in the Army. What about somebody who comes back from a theater of service, wherever that might be, maybe with PTSD? Would it be less likely for them to go to a doctor or a VA doctor or even just a private doctor if they're afraid that because they have PTSD, an individual who knows how to handle a firearm would never be allowed to have a firearm for the rest of their lives? So that's
a very good point.
Very good questions. Well, I'm not going to try to answer all those questions. Let's see if we can get a few people to do so. So let's head out to South Carolina. Reggie, you have the floor. What would you like to add to the conversation?
How you doing, first of all? I served 4 years active duty, 9 years National Guard. I shot every kind of weapon there was, but I'm not, gun crazy or gun happy. Machine guns, pistols, M16s. For 13 years, I was shooting weapons. It just, for me looking and stuff, it just seems like it's divided down the line. I mean, when you watch the news and stuff, you hear Caucasians like he's trying to take our guns, he's trying to take our guns, but rarely do you see African American screaming, he's trying to take our guns. So I'm just trying to figure out why is it that, it's just divided down the race line once again. A certain group feel like he's trying to take our guns, but like say NBC, Fox, or whatever, you don't hear African Americans screaming and hollering like he's trying to take our guns. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out what's the psychology behind that.
I think it may be not so much black-white as it is urban-rural, because the president, I think it was the second quote I played, and I could play it again, was he was using and I think he did a good job of saying, when I was in Chicago, here we hear about these shootings, and we're really fearful of guns, and then Barack Obama and Michelle Obama go out to Iowa, and at one point Michelle says, if I was out here on one of these farms and the sheriff's department is way down the road, I might be a little concerned that somebody could pull off the highway, come into our farmhouse, and I'd want to have access to a rifle or a shotgun. So I think that's maybe where the divide is, maybe not so much black-white as it is urban-rural. But, I think you raise a good question. I'm not sure I have a quick answer for it.
I appreciate that. Like I say, honorable discharge, everything. I mean, like I said, I don't own one. 13 years in the military total. Just for me, South Carolina would kind of rule, but that's just me. Everyone has a right to their opinion. Everyone has a right to bear arms.
You mean you were done with guns once you got out of the military?
You're done with guns.
Yeah, pretty much. Like I said, I know what they can do. People say, people kill people with guns, but it has to be a person has to pull the trigger to kill the gun. Mm-hmm. If you had a stick in your hand, shaped like a gun, if you go pow, that person is not going to die. So in my opinion, yes, a gun does kill a person because the person is pulling the trigger. If they didn't have a gun in their hand, then no one would get killed. But that's just my analogy of it, though. So it's just all the stuff about, guns kill people, people kill people, not guns. If you don't have a gun, you can't kill no one.
Well, how about we say guns don't kill people, but people with guns do kill people?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. You have a gun in your... Yeah, so, this is my ideal and stuff, though. I'm just one person, serve my country proudly and stuff, but I'm just trying to get a grasp on this thing. My thing is, man, it's just kind of, the moments of tragedy, it seems like everyone should come together, but with this gun thing, like no one can come together. When the Twin Towers fell, everyone, came together, but on this gun thing, I'm just like, man, nobody don't want to budge, nobody don't want to give an inch for whatever reason.
Well,
I think there are a lot of people in the country who would not want to have a gun. They don't want to be trained. They don't want that responsibility, but they're glad that there are other citizens out there who are trained and who might be anywhere in the restaurant or wherever you are in the mall who, they're glad that we have a culture where people can carry a gun because they feel safer that way. And I feel that way. I do.
Yeah. And again, sometimes when I speak to, as a matter of fact, I'm going to be doing this pretty soon here, speaking at a place on ethics, one of the things we talk about is self-defense. Well, I recognize there are a number of Christians who are pacifists and say, would never use a gun. I would never even use a knife. I would not do anything to actually defend my family. But I'm grateful that I'm living in a culture where there are other people that can defend me. And so that's certainly the case. On the other hand, you have individuals, as we've talked about before, that say that when seconds count, the police are only minutes away. And so there is a reason why some people also feel like they should control and have some access to a way to defend themselves. Reggie, thank you for your service to the country. Thank you for your comment, and we'll take some more right after this.
In less than a month, the country will begin the formal process of picking a president. The nation's first state contest, the Iowa caucuses, begin February 1st. On the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton holds a substantial lead in the polls there. But opponent Bernie Sanders continues to draw large crowds and raise lots of money. There's much excitement on the Republican side. Who will drop out? Who will remain? Who will get their vote out? Who will emerge, perhaps not winning, but with lots of votes making a strong showing in states that are not winner-take-all? Who has staying power? Developments in the presidential contests made 2015 a crazy year. But some things in politics don't change. Morton Blackwell has taught the principles of political campaigns to thousands of conservatives, spanning a couple of generations through his Leadership Institute. He articulates some rules that stand the test of time. Here are the questions this wise teacher of the laws of the public policy process says we should ask about candidates when choosing one to get behind. First, does the candidate have a record of personal activism and leadership for conservative principles? If you're not looking to support a conservative, you could apply this question to whatever principles the candidate espouses. Morton Blackwell says, talk is cheap. Actions have consequences. Past performance does not necessarily predict future results, but it usually is the best indicator. Second question, does the candidate surround himself or herself with people notably committed to the candidate's principles? The famous adage, personnel is policy, applies here. As Morton Blackwell points out, if elected, a candidate without an inner circle of reliable conservatives to help him or her staff and administration has no chance of winning victories in tough battles against liberals. And think about the enduring impact of a president's Supreme Court appointments. Here's another good question. Has the candidate ever continued to fight hard for his or her principles when it appeared to be a losing battle? Morton Blackwell says, never fully trust anyone who has not knowingly gone down fighting for an important good cause that he or she believed was losing. And a related question, does the candidate frequently reverse his or her positions on important issues? This candidate can't be trusted to keep promises. To test a candidate's commitment to causes he or she campaigns on, Morton Blackwell says to go back and see how much support that candidate has given over the years to organizations and other candidates working to advance those causes. Every elected official needs lots of support in and out of politics to get things done. And here's a key question to ask. If elected, would the candidate melt when the heat is on? The left has increased and solidified power in so much that affects American life and government. It's going to take a president with great strength of character to loosen that grip. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. It is Weekend Edition. Penna Dexter. Let me just mention real quickly that also earlier in the week we talked about that standoff in Oregon, and I never really answered a question that some of you asked, and maybe I should have tried to answer that a couple of days ago, but as you kind of come to the end of the week, you sort of like to circle back to a couple of those issues, and many of you were saying, how is it that Dwight Hammond, 73 years of age, and Stephen Hammond, 46 years of age, who served a short period of time and then were sent back to prison. Of course, that's what Ammon Bundy and all the others came to protest. How is it that they got prosecuted on terrorism charges? Because this is not terrorism. Well, Catherine dug this up. This comes from Mark Hemingway. And it turns out that if you go back to what was happening in Oregon before this, you had an eco-terrorist group called the Earth Liberation Front. And they actually had burned down a forest ranger station. They had actually done a number of things. They oftentimes used to knock spikes into trees so that when somebody tries to cut down the tree, it would send metal and kill individuals. So they were identified as a terrorist group. And interestingly enough, they actually burned down a facility in Burns, Oregon, the very one that Eamon Bundy is in right now.
Kidding.
And so once I saw that, I realized, oh, they aren't eco-terrorists like the Earth Liberation Forest front, I should say. But they had, on a couple of occasions, one time did some burning of land, actually to reduce and remove a lot of the invasive species, and another time used a backfire to prevent the fire from coming onto their land. But at least, I don't agree with it, at least for the first time, Penna, I finally understood how you could call these two individuals who have such a nice family. And I even understand that some of the listeners to Point of View are talking about even starting a GoFundMe account to help them pay for some of the damages that they have to pay for. But nevertheless, how in the world did they get listed as terrorists? Well, we live in this upside-down world where the assault at Fort Hood or even the killings in San Bernardino sometimes get labeled as gun violence or workplace aggression. And then individuals who are obviously not terrorists, they get listed as arsonists and terrorists. So maybe at least that answers the question that some of you had earlier in the week about how they could possibly be prosecuted. And I don't have the answer to how this isn't double jeopardy. I mean, they were brought in prison, they were brought out, and the judge sent them back again. And theoretically, they're supposed to actually be in jail for 5 years now. So,
well, thanks. That's what you get from Point of View is good research.
Well, again, we'll thank Catherine for digging
clarifying
that up. And again, you can find that in the Weekly Standard. Mark Hemingway goes into that in a little more detail. We talked with Gary Bauer about what happened in Germany. So let's go to Bert in Georgia. Bert, what would you like to add to the conversation?
Yes, I was just listening to the program over one of the Christian stations here in Augusta, Georgia. What I don't understand, maybe you could go back and these assaults on these ladies in Germany. Did the police or law enforcement take any action? I spoke with a lady just a minute ago and understood that they arrested some of them. Is that true or what?
That is true. And here, what you have is, and I'll give you some of the quotes, senior official with the German National Police described it as chaotic and shameful. And frankly, they were just overwhelmed. You can imagine, let's say in Georgia, maybe you're in Augusta, Georgia. We need a little bigger town. Let's use Atlanta, Georgia, okay? You can imagine if 1,000 people in Atlanta, Georgia started doing this. There is just simply no way. I don't think you have enough police officers in Atlanta. You certainly don't have them in Augusta, Georgia, because I've been there before, to handle 1,000 individuals who, and they're described now, I guess, as of Arab or North American origin, at least in this article.
Arab or North American.
Whatever. Or North African, I should say. Excuse me. I misread that. But again, these are individuals that I just simply think they could not have controlled right there at the railroad station. And imagine if 1,000 people came to a bus station, came to an airport, whatever it might be. I mean, you just simply overwhelm all of those individuals that are actually in law enforcement. And so I think that's why the situation got out of hand. And Bert, one of the other things we found, and Gary mentioned it, and that's just now been a story that's broken, this didn't just happen in Cologne, Germany. It happened in other places. So it looks like it might have even been orchestrated.
It might have been planned. It's certainly a form of terrorism, in a sense. And the whole notion that he brought up about a conquering army that would come in and abuse women, that was new to me. I had not thought about it.
I had not thought about that either.
Boy.
But again, they're described, now I want to get it right, Arab or North African origins. I'd seen another one where they didn't even identify their background, and in some of these cases, I have a story here of a woman where she was wearing a hood and they dropped firecrackers in her hood. And so now she was burned and she'll have scars for the rest of her life. There are others that were using fireworks. Some were pelted with glass bottles. Others, and since we have children listening, I won't get into all the things they did to the women, but you can imagine all the kind of sexual assault, the attacks, And it
so
was
then it
out of
squelches
control.
our freedom again, because every time there's a celebration or a holiday or an event, you're all of a sudden worried about this type of thing in Europe. And of course, a lot of those things were exported to other places.
Bert, I hope that
Sir,
answers
could I
your
say-
question. Go ahead.
No, sir. Well, let me make one point. That should be a wake-up call to Germany, to the law enforcement and to military. Personally, it would have been good if they had been military there. That they might not have had I don't know how many, they say several hundred, with automatic weapons. I fired an M14. It'll fire as a machine gun. I'm talking about machine guns, and just literally mowed down just as many as, if they had killed several hundred of those terrorists, and I mean literally slaughtered them. That would have sent a message around the world. I think it's a wake-up call for Germany and other countries, law enforcement, military, with full automatic assault that'll fire as a machine gun. And I mean literally, they could have slaughtered several hundred of those terrorists.
Well, I hope they didn't.
Hello?
And, of course, they didn't have the ability to do so because...
No, they didn't know it was coming.
And really all they carry, I think their service pistol is a Glock. So, that's better than nothing because in England, sometimes all they have is bobby sticks. So
now all these celebrations are going to have military protection.
Yeah, or screening or all the rest. Bert, you raised a very good question, and we're simply out of time. I wish we had more time to talk about that, but let me one more time encourage you to do a few things. First of all, to watch that video of Planned Parenthood and pass it on to others. Number two, to go to our website, pointofview.net, and you will see Penna's very good column, Candidate Qualities, some very important questions you need to ask of candidates. And as you're there, 15 days in Israel and Greece. We're going to be taking a trip to there in May. Penna, you're going in just a couple of weeks to Israel.
I am, but I recommend our listeners sign up and go with you.
Yes. Well, again, you've been there, and you felt safe, didn't you?
I felt very safe.
Gary
They
Fraser
know how to
on
do
there.
it. They know how to do it.
Yeah, they certainly do. Well, again, just lots of things to cover. So, again, take the time to visit the website, pointofview.net. You'll find some of the viewpoints, commentaries there. And those of you that have signed up, you'll receive Penna's tomorrow. And, of course, mine comes out Monday through Friday. Hers comes out on Saturday. Again, you can click on that button there, 15 days in Israel and Greece. And that's an opportunity to go to the Sea of Galilee and all the surrounding area, to Jerusalem. Then we get on an airplane and we go to Athens and Corinth and Philippi and Thessalonica, and it's going to be a great time. So you can go to either Israel or Greece or both, and I hope you'll join us for the entire 15 days. It will change your life as you have a chance to walk where Jesus walked and walk where Paul walked. And so again, all sorts of resources on our website today, pointofview.net. You can find out more about the Family Research Council, American Values, and some of our guests. And so please visit the website, pointofview.net. Have a great weekend. I want to thank Andrew and Catherine and Chris for their help behind the scenes. We're going to spend some time on Monday, first of all, talking with John Lott about gun control. And then Dr. Timothy McGrew is actually going to be in studio with us to talk about apologetics and how to defend the Christian faith. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday.
Have you ever thought about taking a trip to the Holy Land? I know I have, but perhaps like me, you've always thought, there's no way I could ever afford it. And how would I get around, make sure I see everything? Well, maybe, just maybe, it's time to realize you can do it. Point of View has made the plans. 15 days, 10 in Israel, the possibility of 5 more on the journeys of Paul in Greece. And the cost? Well, it's pretty surprising. You can check it out at pointofview.net. Click on the Journey to Jerusalem banner. Imagine yourself in Caesarea and Nazareth, where Jesus grew up, in Capernaum, on the Sea of Galilee. We don't suggest you get out and try walking, but, well, you could. The Dead Sea, Masada, the Temple Mount, the Garden Tomb, it's all included, and you'll be accompanied by Kerby Anderson. And I don't even have time to talk about Greece. Athens, Corinth, Berea, Thessalonica, Philippi. See the full schedule at pointofview.net. Come on, take that next step. Pointofview.net. Journey to Jerusalem. Pointofview.net. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.